This video will go over the review and reflect for the topic of exponential functions. For the review, it is stated that the function is 1-to-1, and our job is to find the inverse of that function. You may want to pause this video here so that you may attempt to answer the question on your own. The steps for finding the inverse function is the first thing we need to do is to make sure we change f of x into y. After we do that, we're going to switch the x's with the y's and y's with x's. Then we're going to solve for y. And then we're going to change the y into the inverse function of x. So if we do step 1, we're going to change this to y is equal to 2x over x minus 1. The next thing we need to do is switch the x's and the y's. So the y becomes an x, 2y, and y minus 1. Then the next thing we need to do is to solve for y. So notice we have a fraction, and to get rid of fractions, what we can do is multiply both sides by the LCD, the least common denominator. In our case, this is the only denominator we have. We're going to multiply this side by y minus 1, and we're going to multiply the other side by y minus 1. What I do know is that the side that has the fraction will no longer have the fraction, and I'll just have 2y. Over here, I'm going to do the distributive property and get xy minus x. So I multiplied and got xy, and I multiplied and I got x. So notice I have, we're solving for y, and we have y on two sides. So I am going to take this and put it to the other side. So I'm going to have negative x, 2y minus xy. Since both of these have a y, I'm going to GCF the y out. And we can see by doing the distributive property, we'd get 2y, and we'd also get negative xy. And on this side, I would have just my minus x, or negative x. From here, to solve for y, I just need to divide both sides by 2 minus x, 2 minus x. And I find that y is equal to this fraction of negative x over 2 minus x. The only thing I can do differently, this is fine the way it is, the only thing I can do differently is to get that negative and multiply the top by a negative 1 and the bottom by a negative 1. When I do that, the top will now become a positive x, and at the bottom I'll have a positive x minus 2. Again, I'm doing the distributive property here. When I multiply negative x times a negative 1 is how I get a positive x, and then negative 1 times a 2, that's how I'm getting that minus 2. And that's equal to y. And then the last thing I would do is to change that y into the inverse function of f. Now let's turn our attention to the reflect of the page. After the lecture videos, you will be able to answer these questions, in which we are looking for the y value when x is equal to 5 over 2. We're going to see what y value we get when we plug it into the g function. Remember, we're looking for the y value. We'll get this from the graph. We can also get this in the calculator, but I want to make sure that you understand that this notation just means x is equal to the value, and you're looking for the y value on the graph. And it creates our point of 5 over 2, comma, the g of 5 over 2 on the g graph. And that concludes this video.